Welcome to WonderWorks series Saturdays in Space. If you missed any of the previous videos, please go watch them. We will now continue with the final installment of Ask an Astronaut with NASA's Dr. Don Thomas.
Okay, another question comes in from Carter. And Carter asks, how do you use tools while in space? Now, Carter, we use some of the same tools, especially if we're going outside doing a spacewalk, in space. We're going to be constructing the space station, repairing something. So we have the same tools that we might use here on Earth. A lot of them are cordless power drills and things like that. So the only difference is when we take that tool to space, we make sure that it's attached to us with a little cord or a cable. Because in space, if I have a power drill and I accidentally let go of it, it's going to be floating off into space. So all of our tools are attached with a little cable or rope so that if somehow we let go of it, it doesn't float off. We can just pull the rope and it'll come back to us. But we have many of the same tools, power screwdrivers, power wrenches, things that we would do here on Earth that we want to do up in space. They try to design them with that in mind to make sure that there's not a lot of really tiny screws, that it's easier for an astronaut to deal with. But we use many of the same tools. And again, the key is just to make sure that they don't go floating off on you. Okay, another question from Christy here. And Christy asks, does traveling in space have any effect on your mind or body? And Christy, there's a lot of things that happen to the human body when you go to space, when you're in zero gravity up there. Some of the big things that happened is our muscles get weaker up in space because we're not using them. Everything is weightless up there. I can lift your car at home with one finger in space. Okay, so we're not using our muscles, and our muscles get weaker every day in space. So we need to exercise. Exercise is really important in space. And on my missions, we had a little bicycle we would ride every day for 45 minutes. It would get your heart muscle going, get your leg muscles working. So when you come back to Earth at the end of the mission, that you're still in good shape. Your heart doesn't have to pump against gravity to get blood to your brain, right? Here on Earth, if you're sitting or standing, your heart has to pump extra hard to get the blood up to your brain. It has to fight gravity. In space, the heart doesn't have to work as hard. So just like all your other muscles, because it's not working as hard, it'll kind of shrink and get a little bit weaker in space. So other things that happen, our bones get weaker in space as well. Here on Earth, we put force on our bones every day. We're walking, we're fighting gravity. You're carrying your books in backpacks. And putting force on your bones is what stimulates them to grow. Weightlifters who put a lot of force on their bones have the highest density, the strongest bones of any athlete. Well, in space, you can probably guess how much force you have on your bones, which is almost zero, right? Again, you're just floating through the air. You are, not walking. You're not carrying anything. Everything is weightless up there. So no force on your bones. They get a lot weaker. So we have special exercise equipment that we use as well that we can do some weight training. We can't use a normal weight like a barbell here on Earth because it's weightless and I could lift it with one finger. But we have like a barbell that's tied to springs and pulleys. And so when you're pushing or pulling on it, you're using your muscles, and you can do weight training to strengthen your bones in space. Also in space, we get exposed to more radiation. We're up above the atmosphere and we get exposed to more radiation. That's a long-term effect. It has no big impact in the short term, but the more radiation you get exposed to, the higher your chances are of getting some, cancer in the future. So we monitor that. We try to be very careful with that as well. But there are these changes that take place. Your muscles get weaker, your heart gets a little weaker, and some of the astronauts have noticed their vision changes a little bit in space. The shape of the eyeball changes, because of lack of gravity up there. And so some astronauts who wear corrective devices like the glasses I'm wearing here, they notice that their prescription seems to change a little bit when they're in space, just because the shape of their eyeball will change a little bit. Fortunately, most of this all goes away when you come back to Earth. When you come back to Earth, your muscles get stronger again, your bones get stronger, your vision typically comes back to normal. The only long-term impact of being in space right now is that radiation exposure. And that's a long-term effect depending on how much radiation you get there. Okay, let's get the next question here. And that comes from Katie. And Katie wants to know, how do you get around in space without gravity? Yeah, Katie, great question. Here on Earth, you want to get around, you just walk. You can run, you can skip, you can swim through water. There's a lot of different ways to move around on Earth when you're in gravity. But up in space, in zero gravity, we don't walk. So when you want to move around in space, all it does, it just takes a little push with your finger and you go sailing through the air like Superman or Superwoman. It doesn't take much of a push. If I would push off really hard, I would go slamming through the air, hit the wall, and hurt myself. So in space, it's very small, gentle movements, just a little push here, a little push there to keep us going in a nice straight line. So just by floating through the air, that's how we move around in space. No walking at all. We don't wear shoes in space. That sounds kind of funny, right? But since we're not walking, you don't need shoes up there. All the pictures of the astronauts, you'll see them wearing socks to keep their feet warm, but you won't see them wearing shoes up there. The only time you might see an astronaut wearing shoes is when they're running on a treadmill or doing some exercise. We had an exercise bike where we had biking shoes and you could clip the toes in and pedal away on the bike. Then you wear shoes, but for the rest of the time, you don't. Okay, another question here from Shaka. And Shaka asks, does weightlessness or a lack of gravity change some of our internal body functions? And Shaka, for some of the astronauts, when they go to space, when they first get up there, they experience what we call space sickness. And it's a little bit like being seasick, car sick, or air sick. They'll have an upset stomach. Some of the astronauts may be throwing up for the first day up there. They just get dizzy. They're disoriented from the lack of gravity. But after 2 days, 3 days, something like that, everybody's feeling fine again. So that's one thing that happens in space, and because of that, if you do get space sick up there, your stomach tends to shut down for a few days. So if you would eat something, it wouldn't be processed by your stomach. It's just going to sit there in your stomach. So your digestive system doesn't work properly just for those people with this space sickness until they adapt. And again, it only takes a day or two. Once you're adapted to space, like after a couple of days up there, all the body functions, everything works pretty much normal. Everything that you can think of, digestive system, your hearing, vision, all of that, works pretty much the same. But the only thing that we noticed is that digestive. So if somebody was sick, if they had a headache the first day in space and, they weren't feeling well, if you gave them an aspirin, it's just going to sit in their stomach. It's not going to dissolve. It's not going to, help them at all. So when we give medications to people the first day or two in space, if they're not feeling well, we would do it with an injection that'll definitely get into their system there. Because again, the stomach kind of shuts down for that first day in space for some of the astronauts. But for everybody else, the human body goes on and it's pretty well adaptable to zero gravity. Okay, next question from Roy Joe. And Roy Joe asks or says, the students in my construction classes wonder, as difficult as it is keeping nuts, washers, and bolts aligned and in hand in the shop, how is that done in space when you're working with no gravity and no floor to catch fumbled parts? So that's a really good point. If you're working on something in space, if you had to take out 20 screws, as you unscrew each one, it's going to float around. So if I had to do some repairs on something and I had to take, 20 screws out of a container one time, I had some duct tape and I would put that on our little workbench area. And as I took each screw out, I would kind of, put it on the duct tape, kind of tape it down to make sure it didn't float off because I didn't want to lose those at all. So anything that floats off, maybe you can grab it and find it. If you lose it, it's going to float through the air. It's going to end up at that air intake where our filters are. So if we lose anything along the way, we always go to the air filter to see, okay, is this where it is? You know, if you're missing some of your M&Ms that you were tossing around, or some washers or nuts, you know, from a project you're working on, then you know where to go look for them. So we use Velcro to anchor things down. We use duct tape. You know, we'll just take a loop of that, put it on a flat surface, and then our little parts can stick on that. But what NASA does primarily is they design whatever it is that's repairable to minimize that. So we use screws that are kind of capture screws. When you unscrew it, it doesn't float off. It stays, it's fixed and attached to the piece. But you could unscrew the screws and then remove a panel, all without those screws, you know, floating off. So they try to make it simpler for us because it is a challenge, especially when you're doing a spacewalk and you're wearing gloves and your gloves are pressurized. It's just a lot harder to do things. So the designers, the people who are thinking about these repairs, they try to design these activities and the repairs, the tools and the screws, to make sure they're maybe a little bit bigger if possible, so that they're easier for the astronaut to handle in space. All right, the next question comes from Michael, and Michael wants to know, why do astronauts always wear white spacesuits? Do you have any other colors the spacesuits can be? Why or why not? Now, Michael, the white spacesuits that you're talking about are probably the spacesuits that you see when the astronauts are doing a spacewalk. All the astronauts, we all wear these white spacesuits. And the reason they're white is the white reflects the sunlight. When you're in the sunlight in space, it is really hot. It's 250 degrees in the sunlight in space. At nighttime, when the sun sets, the temperature outside is minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So think about it. You're orbiting the Earth every hour and a half. You get 45 minutes in the sunlight when it's super hot, 250 degrees, and then 45 minutes at nighttime when it's super cold, minus 200 degrees. That spacesuit has to protect our astronaut from the hot temperatures and the cold temperatures. Well, the spacesuits are white because they reflect the sunlight. So if we're out in the sun, you know, if it was a black suit, it would absorb the sunlight and absorb that heat, and the astronaut would get hotter. But with the white spacesuit, it can reflect a lot of the sunlight, and that prevents the spacesuit from getting hotter. We have some other colors. If you look at the spacesuit that the astronauts wear during launch or landing, on the space shuttle, I wore an orange spacesuit. And why would you wear an orange one? The orange suits were for launch and landing, and they were orange because we had the capability to escape if there was an accident. If there was a problem, we could blow out the side hatch of the space shuttle, jump out, and parachute back to Earth if we weren't too high. If we're 10 or 20,000 feet above the Earth, then we can do that. And our orange spacesuit, it was orange for the rescue people, so that we're very visible. Maybe we parachute out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We would have an orange life raft. We're sitting in that suit, in the life raft with our orange spacesuit. And again, all that orange color helps make us a little more visible for the rescue people. So those are the two colors that we use. Orange, if it's a suit that you can possibly escape, you know, out of a vehicle, a crashed vehicle, or if you're going to parachute out of there, you would wear a bright color, or the white ones we wear when we're doing a spacewalk. Those are the only two. Maybe in the future, going to Mars, they come up with some more fashionable spacesuits. I've seen some designs with people. They would like to have different colors, and maybe we do that. But those are the reasons right now, is to keep the suit cooler and then to make it very visible for rescue teams. All right. And our very last question here today comes from Amy. And Amy asks, are there any other life forms out in space? Amy, this is a great question and a really good question for us to wrap it up with here today. You know, we have had astronauts, 12 astronauts have walked on the moon during the Apollo program a little more than 50 years ago. We brought back moon dust and moon rocks. We have not found any life at all on the moon. There's no bacteria, no plants, no animals. There's nothing on the moon like that. We also have rovers on Mars. We've been to Mars with these rovers. They drive around. They've been exploring. Again, we have not seen any sign of life on Mars at all. Again, no bacteria, no little plants, no animals, nothing has been found yet. There's only one place in the whole universe that we know for sure life exists. And where is that? It's right here on planet Earth. This is the only place we know for sure that life exists at the moment, right? And that's why it's so important for us to take care of planet Earth. This is it for us. If we ruin Earth, where are we going to go? We don't know. We think there's other planets out there that are Earth-like, but it would take thousands of years to get to them right now with our current rocket technology. So the whole goal here is to take better care of our Earth so we can protect life. Now, having said that, I do think there's other life out in the universe. With the Hubble Space Telescope, they zoomed in on a small part of the sky about the size of the disk of the full moon. And then in that one small part of the sky, they discovered there were 15,000 galaxies. Now, each galaxy has roughly 10 billion stars. And we think every star has multiple planets around it like our sun does. And we also think that these galaxies are evenly distributed. So wherever you look in the sky, day or night, it doesn't matter. When you look in the area of roughly the size of the full moon, you're probably looking at about 15,000 galaxies there. So given that billions of galaxies, billions of stars, all those planets, I do think that there's other life out in the universe, but we have not seen it yet. We keep looking. I mean, NASA has been searching for life on Mars, on the moon, on some of the other planets when we fly by in spacecraft. You know, we're always looking for signs of life, but we haven't seen it yet. But I think maybe one day we make contact with them. So I do think there's other life out there. We have just not seen it yet. When we make that discovery, when that day comes, if and when it comes, it'll be an incredible discovery. If we find life on any one place, another moon, another planet, then that significantly increases the probability that it's out there in many, many, many locations. But we don't know. As I said, the only place for sure that life exists is right here on planet Earth. So we got to take better care of our planet. Wow, you guys asked some really amazing questions today. And it was a lot of fun for me to share my experiences and some of the answers with you. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you got a little bit inspired, along the way as well. So from all of us at WonderWorks, I want to thank you for joining us today, for submitting your amazing questions. Remember, work hard, do your best every single day. Never give up on your dream. And the last thing I want to leave with you is always keep your eyes on the stars. Hey, thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll see you very soon at one of our WonderWorks locations. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for joining us for Saturdays in Space. We appreciate all the teachers and students that sent in their amazing questions. We hope to see you in the future for more educational programs. Make sure you give us a like, a follow, and a share so you don't miss out on upcoming programs and a chance to win free WonderWorks tickets. Thank you.